Mornings at Sparks always began the same. Without fail, I woke at 6:30, no alarm needed. Decades of discipline had hardwired the habit. Today was no exception. Soft golden light filtered through the white cotton curtains I changed every spring. My body, now 78 years old, whispered its quiet protests. A little stiffness here, a dull ache there. But I was still in good shape. Daily walks with Chester, light exercise, and a sensible diet had served me well. I was Winifred Huxley, after all, a woman of order, routine, and practicality. Willow Street welcomed me with its familiar symphony. The steady tick of the grandfather clock in the living room, the hum of the refrigerator, the muted rustle of leaves outside. My home, built in the 70s, was no modern marvel, but it was spotless. The wood floors gleamed from regular polishing. The furniture was decades old yet well maintained, and the air always smelled faintly of lemon oil and lavender. I slipped into my favorite blue cotton robe and shuffled toward the kitchen. Chester, my aging beagle, waited patiently on his neatly arranged bed. "Good morning, Buddy," I said with a soft smile, giving his ears a gentle scratch. His tail thumped the cushion in reply. The kitchen was the heart of my home. Classic white. Cabinets, spotless tiled floors, and the solid oak table where Herbert and I had shared coffee for 43 years. Not much had changed, and I liked it that way. I flipped on the coffee maker, a practical model I'd bought last year, and took out the bills from a tidy folder, sorted and labeled with care. Even in retirement, my accountant instincts never rested. My eyes drifted to a photograph in a silver frame. Herbert stood beside his truck, his smile broad, his blue eyes alive with warmth. "Miss you, old bear," I whispered, as I had every morning since that awful day. The heart attack that claimed him 15 years ago, behind the wheel on a stretch of highway outside Salt Lake. He was only 6'3" as the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. I began reviewing the bills. Electricity, water, insurance, all within budget. Not because I had to be frugal, but because I chose to be. Herbert and I were from working-class roots. He drove trucks. I did the numbers at Horizon Insurance. Together, we lived modestly but wisely. Every paycheck carefully, split between needs, savings, and small, steady investments. We weren't flashy. We were ants, not grasshoppers, Herbert liked to say with a wink. Over the years, our thrift bore fruit. When he passed, the life insurance payout and retirement. Savings added to our careful portfolio. And though no one would suspect it from my simple clothes and modest home, I was a wealthy woman. The phone rang in the living room, jarring me from my memories. "Good morning, Mrs. Huxley," came Doris's cheery voice from the pharmacy on Main. "Your prescription is ready." "Thank you, Doris," I said. "I'll pick it up this afternoon." I noted it in my planner, a small ritual of structure and purpose. Blood pressure pills were just a formality. My 5-year-old Camry waited in the driveway, running as smoothly as the day I bought it, thanks to regular maintenance. Outside, Sparks was waking up. A boy sped past on his bike. The young Martinez couple jogged by, as they did every morning. The town had changed. Newer stores, newer families, but the soul remained. Friendly hellos, neighbors helping neighbors. It still felt like home. Chester barked softly. I poured his food into the bowl. "We belong here, don't we, old man?" But Lel didn't think so. My son left Sparks the first chance he got. College in Reno, then a job in taxes, a sharp-suited life, and a wife named Tavia, whose ambitions sparkled colder than ice. They bought a home in a gated Reno suburb, raised 2 children I mostly knew through holiday video calls. I didn't blame him. We worked hard so he wouldn't have to count pennies like we did. But somewhere along the way, Lel began to see simplicity as failure. He saw me, my home, my town, as outdated. "Mom, why don't you move somewhere more modern?" he asked. During his rare visits, eyes scanning my cozy house like a realtor sizing up a teardown. "I'm comfortable here," I always said. Tavia's visits were worse. She'd glance around my home, her painted smile failing to hide her disdain. "Your place is nice," she once offered, the word weighed down by everything she didn't say. She ran a recruiting agency and judged people by shoes and kitchen counters. I washed my coffee cup, drying it carefully, placing it back in the cabinet. Their attitudes stung, but I never argued. They didn't understand. They didn't need to. They didn't know the truth. Behind the doors of my mahogany secretary, the one real antique I owned, sat folders containing stock certificates, trust papers, and account summaries. Decades of careful decisions, of compound interest, of patience. When Lel got a scholarship, the money saved for his tuition went into stocks. When Herbert died, the payout went in too. Bit by bit it grew. I traveled modestly, gave to charity. Anonymously, bought only what I needed. And no one, not even my son, knew that I had quietly become one of the wealthiest people in Sparks. The doorbell rang. I glanced at my watch. Almost time for the book club meeting. We were discussing a new novel this afternoon. I'd finished it last night, making notes in the margins of my e-reader. I changed into smart slacks and a pressed blouse, added pearl earrings Herbert gave me on our 20th anniversary. A quick glance in the mirror told me I was overdue for a haircut. My hair, soft silver now, was cut in a simple, neat style I could manage myself. As I passed my office, I noticed a folder on the desk. The paperwork for the new house. Yes. That house. A $5 million property in Reno's most exclusive neighborhood, Lakeridge. Bought in cash. Lel and Tavia didn't know. Not yet. It wasn't revenge. It was time. Eleanor, my dear friend, passed 3 months ago before realizing any of her dreams. "Don't put life on hold, Vinny," she said a week before she died. She was right. Our later is shorter than we think. So I decided to take her advice. The new house wasn't just an expensive purchase. It was a symbol of a new chapter in my life. A house with spacious rooms flooded with light. A garden where I could grow roses. A kitchen where I could host guests. Rooms for my grandchildren if they ever wanted to stay overnight. I wasn't going to stage a dramatic reveal in front of Lel and Tavia, but I didn't want to continue to put up with their condescending attitude any longer either. It was time for honesty, for new beginnings, for a life without compromise or excuses. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Lel. "Mom, how are you?" "I'm fine, son," I answered calmly. "I'm going to the library." "Why?" "Just calling to see how you are doing." Tavia and I were thinking of stopping by this weekend. I smiled involuntarily. They never just stopped me. Did something happen? Pause. I could almost see him exchanging glances with his wife. "No, Mom. We just want to see you." "I'll be home this Saturday," I said. "Come over for lunch." "Great," he said a little cheerfully. "I'll see you Saturday." Then I hung up the phone and thought they wanted something. Maybe it was that plot of land I'd inherited from my parents again, or something new. It doesn't matter. A lot of things would change in a few days. I grabbed my bag and car keys, checked that Chester had enough water, and left the house. That day was clear. The neighbors waved at me, minding their own business. Wyfred Huxley, 78 years old, a millionaire in plain clothes, was preparing to start a new chapter of her life without pretension, without gloating, but with acquiescent determination to finally live by her own rules. I was going through Eleanor's things, neatly putting them in boxes. Martha had asked me to help. She was having too much trouble doing it alone, and I knew her mother better than anyone. Aunt Viney, what should we do with these albums? Martha asked, holding up the tattered photo. Albums. Keep them, dear. It's all your family history in there. Martha nodded and carefully placed the albums in a separate pile. She looked so much like Elena when she was young. The same brown eyes, the same easy smile. You know, she said, sitting down next to me on the couch. Mom always said she only had one regret. What's that? That she never let herself live for herself. Always saving for later. Saving up for a future that never came. I stared at the framed picture of Eleanor and me. At the high school graduation. So young, with a twinkle in her eye and a belief in endless possibilities. She dreamed of a lake house. Martha continued. She'd been saving for it all her life. And when she finally saved enough, the doctors diagnosed her. Martha's words echoed in my head as I drove home. Eleanor had died without realizing her dream. And how long did I have left? 5 years? 10, more or less. No one knows their time limit. At home, the first thing I did was to go to my secretary and pull out a folder of financial documents. The numbers on the statement spoke for themselves. I could afford a lot more than a modest house in Sparks and occasional bus trips. The next morning, for the first time in years, I slept in until 8. Chester read softly at the bedside, wondering why his mistress had broken the routine. I patted him on the head and smiled. A new chapter begins today, buddy. After breakfast, I called Sunset Realty, a real estate agency whose ads regularly appeared in the local paper. I'd like to schedule an appointment with a realtor, I said to the girl who answered the phone. I'm interested in houses in the Lakage neighborhood. Of course, ma'am. May I ask your price range? I thought for a moment. 3 to 5 million. There was a pause. I'm sorry. Did you say 3 to 5 million? That's right, I confirmed, holding back a smile. When can I meet with the realtor? The next day at 11 o'clock in Themmening, I met with Cassidy Forrest, a leading luxury real estate specialist. She was an elegant woman in her early 40s with impeccable hair and a perfectly fitted suit. She tried to hide her surprise at seeing me, an older woman in a simple tweed coat and comfortable low-heeled shoes, but her raised eyebrows gave her away. Mrs. Huxley? She asked when I introduced myself. Pleased to meet you. Let's talk about what you're looking for. We settled into her office, which was spacious with stylish minimalist furnishings and a view of the mountains. I'm looking for a house for myself, I began. Spacious, bright, with a large garden, preferably 1 story, or with an elevator and a good view. Cassidy nodded, making notes in her notebook. How many bedrooms do you need? At least 4. 1 for me, 1 for guests, and a couple of rooms for the grandchildren if they ever decide to visit. I see. Did you choose the Lakage neighborhood for any particular reason? It's beautiful, quiet, has a good infrastructure and great views of the lake, I said. It's also close to Reno, where my son and his family live. She nodded again, but there was an unspoken question in her eyes. I decided not to torture her further. I understand your surprise, Miss Forrest. An old woman in modest clothes interested in a $5 million mansion is unusual, but I assure you I am quite solvent. I pulled a folder out of my purse and handed her the documents, account statements, investment portfolio reports, stock certificates. Cassidy looked over the papers, and her professional mask trembled for a moment. Impressive, Mrs. Huxley, she said, handing the documents back. I apologize for my surprise. You see, it's not every day It's not every day you have millionaires who don't look like millionaires. I finished for her with a smile. I understand. Don't worry about it. The conversation went easier after that. Cassidy showed me a portfolio of homes available on the market, and we scheduled some viewings for the coming days. There is one important condition, I said before leaving. I want the purchase information to remain confidential, at least until the deal is finalized. Of course, Mrs. Huxley, confidentiality is our priority. Over the next 2 weeks, I viewed 7 houses. Each was beautiful in its own way, but none evoked the awe I expected to feel. The 8th house was special. Perched on a hill overlooking the lake, it immediately caught my eye with its clean lines and natural integration into the landscape. 2 stories high, but with an elevator with spacious rooms flooded with light and an amazing garden designed by a renowned landscape designer. It's Alan Pierce's work, Cassidy said proudly as we walked through the garden. He rarely takes on private projects. I nodded silently, admiring the artful plants and elegant stone paths. Herbert would love it here. He'd always dreamed of a large garden. Inside the house was even better. A spacious kitchen with an island in the middle where you could cook for the whole family. A cozy library with built-in bookcases. A master bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a spa-like bathroom. What do you think, Mrs. Huxley? Cassidy asked when we finished looking around. It's perfect, I replied, not hiding my emotion. How much? Theon is asking $5,200,000, but I think we can negotiate. No need. I shook my head. I'll pay the asking price if the deal is finalized quickly. Cassid's eyes widened. Are you sure? We usually recommend. I'm sure, I said firmly. This house is worth every penny. When can we start listing? The buying process was more complicated than I expected. Endless paperwork, inspections, approvals. Cassidy was patient and competent, guiding me throughout every step with professional confidence. Usually these transactions take several months, she explained. But since you're paying cash and the current owner is interested in a quick sale, we can get it done in 3 weeks. I visited my bank where the account manager, who knew me as a modest depositor with a decent but not extraordinary balance, was shocked when I requested access to my investment accounts for a major purchase. Mrs. Huxley, he said, studying me inquiries. I didn't know you. He hesitated, choosing his words. That I was so rich. I finished for him with a smile. Minus Mr. Jenkins. At our age, one learns to appreciate privacy and modesty. He nodded, still looking surprised, and proceeded to do the necessary paperwork. While the buying process was underway, I started planning the move. I had to decide what to take with me to the new house and what to keep or give away. Old things accumulated over the decades, photos, books, dishes. Each item carried a memory. I was sitting in the living room going through photo albums when the bell rang. It was Lel. Mum, did you remember we're coming on Saturday? Of course not, I answered. I'll expect you for lunch. Okay. We have to talk. I tensed. When Lel talked like that, it usually meant he wanted something from me. About what? Let's do it when we meet. Okay, nothing urgent. I agreed, already guessing what it might be. Probably another attempt to convince me to sell the house and move closer to them, or more likely another request for money for some profitable investment. After the conversation, I went back to my scrapbooks, but my thoughts returned to the new house. I hadn't planned on telling Lel and Tavia about the purchase until the very last moment. Partly because I didn't want to hear their advice and help in choosing, and partly because I wanted to see their reaction when they found out that their poor old-fashioned mother had bought one of the most luxurious houses around. It wasn't revenge. I'm not that petty. Rather, It was a way to finally show the real me without masks or compromise. The next day, Cassidy called with the news. Mrs. Huxley, the owner, has accepted your offer. We can close the deal in 2 weeks, and there's more. He's agreed to vacate the house early so you can move in almost as soon as you sign. That's wonderful. Cassidy, I said, genuinely pleased. Thank you for your work. If you need help moving or settling in, I can recommend some great companies. I thanked her and promised to think about the offer. After the call, I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out a calendar. If everything went according to plan by Saturday's meeting with Lel and Tavia, I would be the official owner of the new house. Perfect timing for the news. I started making a list of things I would take with me. Herbert's pictures, of course, his rocking chair that he liked to sit in the evenings, the collection of books we collected together, Mum's antique carved mirror. Then I made a list of things to buy. New furniture for the living room and dining room, modern appliances, maybe a new bed. The one I had now had served me well for almost 30 years, but I wanted something special for the new house. For the first time in a long time, I felt the excitement, the anticipation of change. It was as if I was shedding the invisible weight I'd been carrying on my shoulders all these years. The weight of expectations, conventions, habits. Over the next week, I quietly and methodically prepared for the move. I packed my things when no one was watching, made arrangements with the movers, chose new furniture through online catalogs. All the while, I kept my usual routine. Going to the store, meeting friends at book club, walking Chester on familiar routes. No one suspected that things would soon change. Even my neighbor Edna, who usually noticed the slightest changes on our street, had no idea of my plans. On the eve of signing the papers, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay in the dark thinking about my life in this house. Lel's birth. His first steps right here in this living room. Long evenings with Herbert at the kitchen table as we planned the future. The last few years, quiet, measured, predictable. I had no regrets about the life I'd lived. Herbert and I were happy in our own way. In simplicity, in honest labor, in planning. A future that, as it turned out, looked nothing like we had imagined. In the morning, I put on my best suit, an austere but elegant navy blue ensemble that I usually save for special occasions. Today was just such a day. Cassidy and the sellers representative were waiting for me at the notary's office. The paperwork was ready. All the checks had been passed. All I had to do was sign the papers and hand over the money. Congratulations, Mrs. Huxley, Cassidy said when the last signature was made. You are now officially the owner of one of the most beautiful houses in Lidge. She handed me the keys, a heavy keychain with a silver left-shaped key ring. When do you plan to move in? Tomorrow, I answered, feeling strangely calm. Everything was already organized. On the way back, I stopped by. New house, my home. I walked through the empty rooms, imagining what they would look like when I was settled in. I stood on the terrace admiring the view of the lake and the mountains in the distance. Herbert would be pleased. Halway said that one day we would live like kings. He didn't live to see that day, but part of his dream did come true. Back home, I called the moving company and confirmed the time. Then I pulled out the photo album with images of the new house Cassidy had prepared for me. Professional shots of every room, the garden, the views from the windows. Tomorrow Lowell and Tavia would see those pictures. They'll see them and realize that they've been wrong about me all these years. That their poor old-fashioned mother was a much more complicated Edison than they realized. I didn't expect them to apologize or admit they were wrong. But I hoped that maybe it would make them see me in a new way. See the real me, not the image they've created for themselves. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Even though Lel and Tavia hadn't promised to be here until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Old habits are hard to break, especially at my age. Waking up early, though, gave me time to prepare properly. Chester, sensing my excitement, didn't leave my side all day. The clever dog could always sense a change in mood. "It's going to be a tough day, buddy," I said, scratching him behind the ears. I pulled an apple pie out of the oven. My mother's recipe that Lel had loved as a child. The smell of cinnamon and baked apples filled the kitchen, making me nostalgic for a time when we were a real family. The clock in the living room struck 2, but my son's car was nowhere to be seen. Typical. They were always late, as if my time was worthless. At 4:03, I heard the distinctive sound of his Audi's engine. Lel liked to drive fast and noisy. Tavia was the first one out of the car, wearing a white pantsuit that must have cost more than I'd spent on clothes in a year. Her flawless hair didn't budge as she bent over to retrieve some kind of package from the back seat. Lel in a light blue shirt and designer jeans looked as trim and well-groomed as ever. My son wasn't what you'd call handsome, but he always had the imposing posture and pleasant facial features I'd inherited from Herbert. I opened the door before they even rang the bell. Lel Tavia. I nodded, letting them in. "It's good to see you, Mom." Lel hugged me awkwardly, patting me lightly on the back. Tavia gave me a dry smile and handed me a bag. "We brought wine and cheese. I hope you have some decent glasses." I silently accepted the package. Decent glasses? Like I was drinking wine out of tin cans. "Sure," I replied calmly. "Come on in. I was just baking a pie." We settled into the living room. Lowell and Tavia sat on the couch and I sat in the chair across from them. Chester, usually friendly with the guests, kept to himself as if sensing the tension. "So?" Lel began after exchanging the usual pleasantries about the weather and traffic. "Was there something you wanted to talk about?" I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "You were the one who called and said you had something important to talk about." Lel glanced over at Tavia. She nodded faintly. "Yes, that's right. We wanted to discuss your future, Mom." I poured tea for everyone and set the cake on the table. Tavia predictably declined, muttering something about diet. Lel, however, cut himself. "A slice. My future?" I questioned. "What exactly are you worried about?" Lel coughed. "Mom, you live alone in an aging house. The neighborhood is getting worse. Tavia and I thought it would be best for you to move to a place where you'll be taken care of." "A nursing home, you mean?" I asked directly. "It doesn't have to be a nursing home," Tavia interjected. "There are great independent living communities for seniors. They have all amenities, on-site medical staff, lots of activities for socialization. And how am I going to pay for this great community?" I inquired. "We can sell this house," Lel quickly replied. "Despite the condition and the neighborhood, it would still fetch a decent amount of money. Plus your pension." "My pension barely covers utilities and groceries," I said. "Will help," Lel said, though it was clear from his tone that he wasn't enthusiastic about the idea. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my son carefully. "What's the real reason for this conversation?" Lel fidgeted. "What do you mean, Lel?" "I've been an accountant for 42 years. I know how to put 2 and 2 together. You never used to worry about how I live me life. What's changed?" Tavia threw her husband an annoyed look, as if to say, "It told you so." "Okay." Lel sighed. "There's one more thing. Remember that plot of land your parents left you? The one on the outskirts of Reno? Ah, that's the thing. The land, 6 acres, that was once considered unbuildable because of its proximity to an industrial zone. Now, with the city's expansion, it's become attractive to developers." I remember, of course. "What about it?" We get an offer from a development company. They want to build a shopping center there. They're offering very good money. And that money is going to pay for my senior community, I asked. Not only that, Tavia interjected. Lel doesn't say everything. We have the opportunity to become minority partners in this project. But it requires a down payment. That's it. They didn't just want the money from the land sale. They wanted to be able to use it for their investment. How much are they offering? For the land, I asked. 800,000. Lel answered proudly as if he'd earned the money himself. He almost laughed. The lot was worth at least twice that much, even without the development plans. And you think that's a good deal? Mum, it's a great offer. Lowell raised his voice. 800,000 for land that's just sitting there idle. Lowell, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. That plot of land is worth at least $1.5 million in today's prices. Tavia snorted. What makes you think that? You hardly even leave the house. How would you know current real estate prices? I ignored her invective. I refused to sell land, and I refused to move into a nursing home either. Lowell blushed, a sign that he was beginning to lose patience. As a child, it always preceded a temper tantrum. Mum, be reasonable, You can't live alone forever. What if you fall? What if there's a fire? Who will help you? I have neighbors who care more about me than my own son. I replied, feeling the irritation building up inside. Those neighbors are a bunch of losers and immigrants. Tavia muttered under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear. Watch your language in my house, I said sharply, surprising even myself. There was a tense silence. Lel finished his tea and set the cup on the table with a clatter. Mom, I'm trying to help. We're both trying, but you're making it impossible with your stubbornness. I'm not stubborn. I'm independent. I countered. There's a difference. Tavia rolled her eyes. Wife would face it. Your house is falling apart. Your pension barely covers your expenses. You're living like she hesitated for words. Like what, Tavia? I pushed her. Go ahead. Like an old, lonely woman who's afraid of change. She finished more softly than she'd intended. I stood up and walked to the window. Beyond it, I could see my small garden with its neat beds of tomatoes and herbs. I'm not afraid of change, I said quietly. On the contrary, I'm more ready for it than you think. Lo let out an exasperated sigh. Mom, we're going in circles. The fact is you need help whether you want to admit it or not. I didn't need help, I said firmly, turning toward them. I'm fine. Okay. Lel raised his voice, getting up from the couch. You call this good? An old house with a leaky roof in a neighborhood where it's scary to walk after sundown. Neighbors who barely spoke English. Furniture that should have been replaced decades ago. Tavia said warningly that he couldn't stop now. No, Tavia. Stop beating around the bush. He turned home, his face contorted with anger. Mum, it's time to face the truth. You're living in this dump because you're a beggar. Because you've spent your whole life saving every dime. Denying yourself. Everything. And where has that gotten you? To a miserable existence in this wreck you call home. There was a heavy silence in the room. Tavia stared at her husband with her mouth open, clearly shocked by his outburst. Chester whimpered quietly and hid undefeatable. I expected to feel anger or resentment at my son's words, but instead I felt a strange relief. At last, the masks had been dropped. He had finally said what he really thought. Are you done? I asked calmly. Lowell seemed only now to realize what he'd said. His face went from red to pale. Mom, I didn't mean it like that. I'm just upset that you won't let us help. I held up my hand, stopping his excuses. No. Lowell, That's exactly what you meant. And you know what? It's a good thing. It's good that you finally said what you really think. I went to the secretary, pulled an envelope out of the drawer, and came back to them. I was going to tell you later, but I think now is as good a time as any. I took the glossy photographs out of the envelope and held them out to Lel. What are these? He asked, reluctantly accepting them. My new house, I answered simply. I'm moving in tomorrow. Lel stared at the pictures in bewilderment. Tavia leaned over to get a better view, and her eyes widened. That's the mansion in Lakeage, she exclaimed. The one that was put up for sale last month. That's right. I nodded. $5 million. I paid full price. No haggling. Lowell looked at me incredulously. Mum, if this is a joke. It's not a joke. I took the purchase documents out of the envelope and put them on the table. You can check. It's all done and paid for. The movers will be here at 10 tomorrow morning to move my stuff. Lel grabbed the documents with trembling hands. His eyes raced over the lines, trying to comprehend the information. But where did you get that kind of money? He finally squeezed it out. Your father and I have always been frugal, I replied. We invested wisely. After he died, I continued that practice. Over the years, I've accumulated a decent amount of money. A decent amount? Tavia nodded nervously. $5 million isn't a decent amount. It's a fortune. I have a lot more than that, I said calmly. The house is only part of it. Lowell dropped the papers on the table and leaned back against the couch. His face, a look of utter confusion. I don't understand, he mumbled. All these years, why you have lived so modestly if you could afford it? Because money wasn't an end in itself, I answered. It was a means of security, of independence. Your father and I didn't see the point of ostentatious luxury. But you could move to a better house, buy a new car, travel, and I did all those things, I said softly. I travel modestly, but regularly. I have a reliable car that I'm completely happy with. And this house, it's where you were born, Lel. It's where Herbert and I spent the best years of our lives. Why would I change if it suited me? Tavia looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Her perfectly lined eyes narrowed, as if she were trying to solve a complex puzzle. All these years, she said slowly, we thought you were barely making ends meet. You thought what you wanted to think, I answered without reproach in my voice. You saw an old woman in plain clothes living in a modest house, and you drew conclusions. You never asked. Never took a real interest. Lel shook his head, still unable to comprehend what he had heard. But why did you have to hide it? Why didn't you tell us? What would have changed if I had? I asked. Would you have visited me more often? Would you stop looking down on me? Or more likely, would you start asking for money for your projects like you did today with that plot of land? Lowell flinched as if slapped. That's not fair, Mom. We've always taken care of you. Really, I raised an eyebrow. When was the last time? You called just to see how I was doing, not to ask for something, or suggest another way to help me that would actually help you. Tavia stood up, adjusting her immaculate suit. I think we need time to process all of this, she said, avoiding my gaze. Lel, we should go. My son rose slowly from the couch. He looked lost-like when he was a kid and couldn't solve a difficult math problem. Mum, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I replied softly. Just know that I've always loved you, and always will no matter what. I walked them to the door. Lel stopped at the door, as if he wanted to say something but changed his mind. Tavia was already coming down the steps, hurrying to the car. Are you really moving tomorrow? He finally asked. Yes, I nodded. A new chapter of life. He nodded awkwardly, and headed to the car where Tavia was waiting for him with an impatient look. I closed the door and leaned my back against it. Chester came out of his hiding place and walked over to me, whimpering softly. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, leaning down to pet him. "It's okay." The morning of the move was surprisingly clear. The sun shone through the curtains, illuminating the boxes neatly arranged in the rooms. I woke up earlier than usual at 5:30 and lay awake for a long time, listening to the familiar sounds of the old house, the creaking floorboards, the ticking of the floor clock in the living room, the distant thump of the refrigerator. Chester, sensing my awakening, came to the bed and rested his muzzle on the edge of the mattress. His brown eyes looked questioning, like he was asking, "Is today the day?" "Yes, buddy." I patted his head. "Today is the day we start a new life." I rose slowly, feeling a slight stiffness in my joints, a common condition in the morning despite regular exercise and walks. 78 years was taking its toll, though I'd been diligent about keeping myself in shape. I put on my robe and went into the kitchen where I put the kettle on. The teacups were already packed, except for one, my favorite, with a picture of English wildflowers, a gift from Herbert for our 30th anniversary. While the water boiled, I walked around the house I had lived in for almost 50 years. Every room held memories. Right here in the living room, Lel took his first steps, holding on to the edge of the coffee table. The Christmas tree stood in this corner every December, filling the house with the smell of pine needles and the holiday. In this kitchen, I taught my son to bake cookies from his grandmother's recipe. But the house looked different now, half empty with boxes instead of the usual stuff, ready to let me go to my new life. It was a strange feeling, a mixture of nostalgia, slight sadness, and anticipation. Exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. A crew of movers, 3 stout young men in uniform t-shirts, smiled welcomingly when I opened the door. "Mrs. Huxley?" the older of the 3 asked, consulting a clipboard. "We're from Reliable Moving Company. Is everything ready?" "Yes. Come on." I stepped back, letting them into the house. The boxes were signed, the furniture to be moved marked with yellow stickers. They worked quickly and professionally, carefully, moving furniture and boxes out. I watched that process from a chair in the corner of the living room, the only place free from the hustle and bustle of the move. At 11:20, my cell phone rang. Lel's name popped up on the screen. I paused, staring at the flashing display. After last night's conversation, I wasn't sure I was ready to communicate with my son. His words still echoed in my ears. "You live in this hole because you're a beggar." The phone kept ringing. I hit the reset button and put the machine away. Right now, I needed to focus on the move, and emotional conversations could wait. An hour later, Tavia called. I didn't answer her either. Then Lel again and again. By noon, my phone had accumulated 7 missed calls and a few messages I didn't bother to read. At 1 o'clock, the last box was loaded onto the truck. The crew chief held out a clipboard for me to sign. "Everything is loaded, Mrs. Huxley. We're off to a new address. Are you coming with us or on your own?" "On my own," I replied. "I need a little more time." When the truck left, I was alone in the empty house. Chester whimpered quietly, feeling the unfamiliar emptiness of the space. I slowly walked around the rooms one last time. The walls that had held echoes of laughter and conversation now seemed alien, ready to welcome new occupants. I stopped at the bedroom window, looking out at the garden where I planted tomatoes and basil every spring. "Goodbye, old friend," I whispered, referring not so much to the house as tough period of life it symbolized. As I stepped out onto the porch, I carefully locked the door. The keys were to be given to the new owners, a young couple with a young child who had bought the house through the same agency that had helped me buy the mansion in Lakeage. I got into the car. Chester settled into the passenger seat as he always did on our trips. Turning the ignition key, I took one last look at the house and slowly pulled away. The drive to Lakeage took about 40 minutes. The scenery changed with each mile. The modest Sparks houses replaced by more impressive mansions. The streets grew wider, the trees taller and more manicured. Finally, I turned onto the long driveway leading to my new home. A truckload of stuff was already parked out front, and the movers had started unloading. Cassidy, my realtor, was waiting on the steps, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Welcome home, Mrs. Huxley." She smiled, walking up to the car as I parked. "Thank you, Cassidy." I accepted the flowers. "That's very nice of you. It made sure everything was ready for your arrival," she said as she led me inside. "Electricity, water, heating, everything is plugged in and working. The security system is activated. Here are your key cards and codes." I entered a spacious hallway with a high ceiling and marble floor. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, creating a play of light and shadow on the walls. Chester sniffed the new space wearily, his claws clawing quietly on the marble. "It's all so majestic," I murmured, looking around. "But it's yours now, Cassidy," reminded me gently. Let things find their places, and the house would get cozy in no time. The next few hours passed in the chaos of the organized move. The movers were bringing in furniture and boxes, and I was pointing out where to put things. My old furniture, good but modest, seemed somewhat lost in the spacious rooms of the new house. But I decided not to rush to buy a new one. Let things settle down first, and I'd get used to the new space.